The sun sagged low over the dry plains of the west, staining the sky in rust-colored streaks as dust swirled around wagons and boots in the small town of Dry Creek, where cattle traders, weary settlers, and rough-mouthed ranch hands gathered to buy or gamble away whatever little fortune life hadn't already taken from them. Among them was Colt Mercer, a quiet rancher known more for his steady hands and a gaze that held storms. He never spoke about them for conversation. For Colt was a man shaped by loss, his bride-to-be taken by fever 2 winters past, leaving his ranch silent, his nights long, and his heart closed like a locked gate under frost. He rode into town that day not seeking companionship, not seeking fate, simply intending to buy a new horse to replace the old mare that had finally given out after years of faithful work. But fate has its own roads, and sometimes it ambushes a man when he least expects it. As Colt approached the auction yard, the usual bleating of goats and restless snorts of horses gave way to murmurs and laughter, the kind that held no kindness in it. And when Colt drew nearer, he saw why. Standing in the center of the crowd, barefoot, wrists loosely bound with a coarse rope, was a woman. Not a girl, not weak, not broken, but standing straight with her chin lifted, eyes steady, expression like someone who has already survived worse than anything this town could do to her. The auctioneer made his announcement loud and proud, as though this were something normal, something righteous. Indentured labor, sold to repay a family debt. Capable worker, companion if the gentleman desires. Bidding starts at $50. And some of the gathered men chuckled, elbowing one another, whispering ugly jokes. But the woman did not flinch, did not bow her head, did not plead. She simply stared forward, like a mountain facing a storm. Colt felt something inside him shift. Something old and almost forgotten, the quiet knowledge of dignity, of strength, of wounds hidden beneath silence. He did not know her story, but he did not need to. He could see enough in her eyes. So when the bidding began, he raised his hand, voice calm and unbroken, and with each crude offer shouted from the crowd. Colt countered, until there were no challengers left and the auctioneer slammed his palm on the wooden post. Sold, to Colt Mercer. And the crowd muttered, surprised, disappointed, curious. The woman was led to him, and she looked into his eyes with the same steady fire she had shown the entire yard. And in that moment there was no fear in her gaze. Only resolve, only the question of what came next. Colt reached for his pocket knife, but before he could speak, she said quietly, not pleading, not ashamed, only stating the truth of the world she had been dropped into, you paid for me. Now take it off, referring to the rope around her wrists. The crowd, expecting something else, leaned forward, but Colt simply cut the rope, letting it fall to the dust. And in that single motion, something unspoken shifted between them, a promise of freedom, though no words were said. He helped her mount his horse, not touching more than needed, and they rode away from the prying eyes and muttered judgments of Dry Creek, dust trailing behind them like the tail of a comet heading toward a new chapter. The ride back to his ranch was quiet, but not tense. There was no fear, no hesitation. Only two people who had learned to live with wounds riding side by side. When they arrived, Colt pointed out the bunkhouse where farmhands once slept in busier years, and told her she could stay there if she wished, adding softly, "You're not here to pay for anything. Not to me." And though she said nothing then, her eyes flickered with something uncertain, confusion, disbelief, maybe even relief, buried too deep to show. Days turned into weeks, and she worked alongside him, not because he asked, but because she refused to be a weight on anyone's shoulders. She mended fences, hauled water, fed cattle, tended the vegetable patches behind the barn, and cooked meals over the wood stove with a quiet ease. She moved through the ranch like someone who had always belonged somewhere, but had never been given the chance to. Colt, meanwhile, found himself speaking again, not much. Just enough, small things about weather patterns, cattle temperament, The kind of things one only says when silence no longer hurts. One evening, as the sky folded itself into a deep purple and the first stars began to whisper awake, Colt found her sitting on the porch steps, knees drawn slightly to her chest, the breeze carrying strands of hair across her cheek, and he sat beside her without a word. After a long, gentle silence, he asked, "When your debt is declared paid, what will you do?" And her breath caught just slightly, as though she had not expected to be given a future of her choosing. She told him, in slow, quiet words, that she had nowhere to return to, that the world she knew had fallen apart long before the auction, that she did not fear hard work, but she feared being alone with memories that would not let her sleep. Colt understood. He understood in a way no language could fully speak, for he, too, had lived in the company of ghosts. She then asked him, "And what will you do after I go?" And Colt, staring at the horizon where the land kissed the fading light, replied simply, "I reckon I'll miss you." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and cooled earth. And she turned to him, voice softer than the dusk around them, and said, "I don't wish to leave." No grand declarations followed, no kiss beneath the stars, no rush of passion, just two broken hearts choosing not to be broken alone anymore. The ranch changed after that. Not in loud ways but in the gentle kind. Laughter returned. Meals were shared at the same table instead of apart. Mornings were greeted together instead of alone. And when autumn came and the leaves turned gold along the hills, Colt asked her, with no audience but the open sky, "Will you stay with me?" Not because of what was paid, not because of any debt, but because this, you and me, feels like something worth keeping. And her answer came without hesitation. Quiet but unshakable, "I stayed the moment you cut the rope." They married in the clearing behind the barn, beneath aspens whispering in the wind, with no preacher but the land that had witnessed their healing. And in Dry Creek, the story changed, no longer spoken in whispers of ownership or shame, but in awe of how two souls found each other when the world had already taken almost everything from them. And if this story reached your heart, if you felt the wind of the plains in it, the quiet strength of healing, the power of respect and second chances, winter crept across the plains, laying frost like silver lace over the ranch. And the quiet between them grew warmer, steadier, like two fires finally finding the same flame. She worked beside Colt every day, their movements in rhythm without needing words. Town whispers faded. What they built could be seen in every corner of the land: mended fences, fuller herds, and laughter returning to the porch. One morning, a rider arrived with a legal document stating her debt was fully cleared and she was free to go anywhere she wished. Colt handed it to her with steady hands but eyes that feared goodbye. She folded the paper slowly, placed it on the table, and said softly, "I already chose where I belong." And Colt, who had lost everything once, realized this time he was being given something back, not by chance, but by choice.